Welcome to Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I am your host and a guide through the show. And today is a returning guest that I am super excited to have back. We have Eirik Gislason, who has been a trusted guide and fierce advocate for both clients and agents. He is a realtor and a trainer in New York with Brown Harris Stevens, but he has helped clients navigate the complexities of one of the most competitive real estate markets in the world. Eirik brings a one-of-a-kind blend of skills, talent, and experience to the table. He's a top-producing associate broker and team leader of the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens in New York. He's a former director of sales and development, New York State certified instructor, a real estate coach, and the founder of Archway Partners Coaching. He is a master certified negotiation expert, a global Clifton Strengths certified coach, an IFC AAC accredited coach, and a nationally recognized negotiation instructor and speaker. He's known for transforming agent success and longevity through negotiation expertise, communication strategy, value conveyance, and unshakable self-confidence. Through Archway Partners Coaching, Eirik is creating the next generation in real estate education and coaching, rooted in strategy, collaboration, clarity, and human connection. Eirik, welcome back to the show.
DJ, it's so good to be back. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I can't wait to have a conversation with you again.
Myself as well. And we rarely have guests back. So this is very exciting for me because when we were talking about it with my producer, I said, oh, we have to have him back, because I believe, and I know we're not maybe just going to talk about negotiation, but I think it's one of the most important skills a realtor can develop, and probably one of the most underdeveloped skills in many agents. So I know it's been, close to 2 years since we talked last. But since then, you have launched your own podcast, Sheerline Negotiation Mastery, which I believe just kicked off season 2. So that's congratulations.
Right. Thank you. I am nowhere near the depth and breadth of the podcast episodes that you have. So congratulations on all of your success. As I mentioned you, I'm an avid listener and have been even before the first time I was on. But yeah, I followed in your footsteps. I now have a podcast. We're about 4 episodes into season 2. It's called Sheerline Negotiation Mastery. And it's kind of interesting that the Sheerline part of it, it's a dual meaning. Sheerline, for those of you who know or ever examined the inside of a tumbler lock, when you put the key into the lock and all the pins rise to the level they're supposed to rise to when you have the right key, it creates this imaginary line called the shear line, which allows you to turn the key and open the lock. And then it's also where 2 weather systems collide, and it creates a lot of upheaval, storms, lightning, weather systems. So it's kind of that conflict. So that's where we came up with the name, and we try to address one facet, one topic, one theme on negotiation in every episode.
So is that it, just to make sure I understand? So it's this idea of arriving at a perfectly lined up sort of situation, but through chaos, upheaval. Is that sort of?
Yeah. The idea that and this is where, as you mentioned, negotiation is such an important topic or important skill for real estate professionals, or anybody in any facet of their life, but especially for real estate professionals. But we have this love-hate relationship, mostly hate, with real estate professionals, with even the word negotiation, or the idea of it. And so our idea through this podcast is, as we say, to reclaim and restore the good name of negotiation, and look at negotiation through the lens that it should be looked at through, which is one of win-win solutions, and actually creating value where both sides of a transaction, whether one is going to get more than the other, there's no question about it. And my job as a negotiator is to get as much as I possibly can for my client. But through that win-win, we realize that there is a possibility for both sides of that transaction to feel as though they were treated fairly, and feel as though they got enough to make that deal worthwhile, or enough to meet their minimum goals. And when we can do that in our lives, that makes everything more rich. So this idea that negotiation is this hard bargaining thing where people are pitted against each other, it doesn't have to be that. And we can look at negotiation through a lens that is much, much more robust, much more fulsome, and that actually provides additional value if done correctly.
What is hosting a podcast now about negotiation? What has it taught you about negotiation?
Oh, hey, it's interesting because we drill down on one theme. It's helped. I've been, and I've now, this is an expertise that I've been developing for over a decade. And I've been in real estate as a real estate professional for over 20 years, but really, really diving deep into teaching, training, instructing, and examining negotiation, collaborative negotiation specifically. This is something I've been doing for over a decade. But on the podcast, when you really drill down to logic and reasoning, or courage, or significance, or something that is that specific, or of a theme or a topic on negotiation, and you bring someone in who's got an expertise around that one topic, you really start to see how you can go down a deep rabbit hole in each of these topics that when you come out of it, you have a much better idea or a much clearer vision of how to address different situations because you've got a clear picture on this one aspect. That's what I love about it. And that's what I've learned so much about doing the podcast. And now we're 23 episodes in, which is a pretty good, a pretty good run.
Yeah, you're doing it. And as you mentioned, you've been in the game now for 20 years in New York City, which arguably a most complex real estate negotiation environment in the country, certainly with co-op boards, board packages, all cash buyers, specific building rules. What has changed about how you negotiate in recent years?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say that the quote unquote soft skills, let's just take a couple of changes in our industry. And I'll start with one that is really recent, but really hits the industry hard or is going to have a lasting change. And that's AI. And, there's a lot of conversations about what AI is going to do to our industry. And I'm not sure. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where this is in 5 years, but what I do agree with many professionals or many experts that talk on the subject is there's two sides to this coin. I mean, on one hand, it's going to make us more efficient. There's no question about it. And there are efficiencies in writing descriptions, in getting ideas, in role playing. There's so many things that you can use AI and especially agentic AI to help you with. But along with that necessarily comes a replacement threat. Like at some point, some of the things that we do, we can offload them to AI, but at some point, some of the things that are the core functions of what we do may or may not be as relevant or as valuable. And when we talk about a value proposition, the benefits that we offer a client, I take great pride in those benefits in how I do them personally and how my team does them and to what level or degree we do them differently or better than the competition. That's how we create that value proposition. And when that goes away, when some of those benefits, unique benefits that you offer, if that's all starting to be systematized or streamlined, that can narrow your value proposition.
Yeah.
But I think what will never go away or won't go away for a long, long time is that human element of the sales process that we bring to the table, especially when it comes to negotiation, especially when it comes to feeling out the other side, understanding the other side, really understanding what they want, need in a negotiation or in a transaction, and being able to work through that, navigate that. That is something that is uniquely human. And so I think that there is also that opportunity for those who can do that human part well to really separate themselves from those who continue to be more and more systematized as AI starts to help us do that. So that's one. And then I think, of course, all of the changes in buyer representation, that's also a new, very recent change, but also one that's disrupted our industry in a big way. I don't think it's changed a lot for those who do their business well, but it certainly has, I think, included or brought in a level of transparency and a need for skill that is different now. You have to be able to speak to your clients in a way that involves that value proposition. You need to be able to be influential and persuasive, but also collaborative and assertive in a way that's going to give your clients comfort that that allows them to hire you despite the fact that it might actually cost them money out of pocket.
Right.
And that there's a commitment to you that there wasn't necessarily in the past. That all, I think, has been another broad change that you can look at it in a couple of different ways, whether it's something that's going to drive you forward or push you back.
Yeah, you're talking a lot about value proposition, which I'm so glad you are, because I find it fascinating, because I think many agents think they have a value proposition, but what they really have is a list of features,
There you
right?
go.
So what's the
Yeah.
difference to you, features versus actual value?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You know that so well, and that's what it is. I mean, the value proposition is very easy to see, and it's what we call a cost benefit analysis. Value is benefits over cost. So it's a very simple equation, but the question is, what are the benefits that you're offering? And if that's unclear, to put it very simply, if your benefits are unclear, or if they don't equate, or they're not equivalent to the cost that the decision maker sees. So if they see that the benefits are less than the cost, or the benefits are confusing, then they're not going to be able to see a path forward to making a decision with you. It may be that they make another decision with someone else, or it may be that they're just confused and they don't make the decision at all. But the benefits piece is the key. We want, as much as we can, to make cost irrelevant by making benefits so far outweigh the perceived cost, or the actual cost, if it's a commission or the price of an apartment. So as you mentioned, there's features and there's benefits, and a feature is something that describes what you do. That's something that doesn't really have any utility. It doesn't provide anything that will do something for that decision maker. And when you can take the feature and turn it into a benefit by adding that utility piece, here's what I can offer. Here's what that will do for you. Yeah. Here's how that will help you succeed. Here's how that will save you time, stress, will reduce your risk, will increase your net after closing. When we can add the utility to the things that we offer, to the features, they become benefits. And when we're able to tailor our benefits to that unique decision maker, that's when it becomes magical. When you have your menu of dozens or hundreds of benefits that you offer a client, and you're able to take from that menu the 3, the 4, the 5 that are going to most impact that client, are going to help solve their problem. Now you're flying, and you're separating yourself from your competition in a big way.
I want to pause for a second, because what you're saying is so incredibly important. My mind is racing, because you said something very significant. I think, if I heard it correctly, and I want to make sure our audience gets this, because we all go into presentations with clients with a list of features. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Right. And you said, okay, that's fine. Yet it's kind of like when I recruit realtors, and if I'm talking to you and I'm trying to recruit you away from Brown Harris Stevens, which I wouldn't do, because you've been there for a long time and you're happy, but let's just say you weren't. And if I said, we have the best training, the best support, the best tools, you'd go, well, everybody says that. You would say, what are you going to do for me and to help my business actually get better? What would that do for me, DJ? And you're saying something very important, is that realtors will go into presentations with a list of features, which is fine. But what they're not doing is, number one, explaining what those features will do for the client. And then the second part of that I heard was tailoring it to what that person actually cares about. So you almost have to like reverse engineer it. You have to first know, what do they care about? What are the things that are most important to them? What are the features I have that can help with those those characteristics this person is into? And then how do I make it so that they understand the actual benefit to them? That's an amazing sort of piece of advice, if I heard it correctly.
Oh, you summarized it incredibly beautifully. I mean, that's exactly it. It is that idea of taking what we might think of as an elevator pitch, which also should include benefits rather than features. But that elevator pitch, even if it is benefits, is really meant to appeal to our client avatar, so to speak, or a typical client, right? And it's something that is consistent. It's something that we would deliver in 30 seconds in an elevator, right? A value proposition is not an elevator pitch. It's something far deeper. And you explained it beautifully, as I said. It is that idea of understanding what reverse engineering it by understanding what that client, what their problem is. What are they trying to solve? What are they worried about? What are they concerned about? Those are things that I want to understand. And then I want to understand them as a communicator or as a personality type, right? Are they an assertive driver? Are they a collaborative feeler, an expressive humanist, an analytic thinker? And they could be a combination of those. And obviously people don't fit perfectly into those 4 categories either. But if we understand those decision maker types and we can start to see how they behave, how they communicate, the decisions that they make, the way that they speak, we can start to hone in on what type of a decision maker they are. And then we can not only can we have our menu of benefits, we can then understand their problem and then deliver the menu of benefits that we've tailored for them in a way that's going to be effective for them. You mentioned that example of if I came to your firm and I and you wanted to recruit me, and you talked about your training, and you talked about your systems, you talk about your technology. Those are features, as you mentioned. Now the question is, how much weight or how much effectiveness or how much value do I put on training, on systems, on technology? And one would think that you would hope that I would want some of those things, but even if I do, I need to understand what those things are going to actually do for me. How am I going to benefit? How am I going to grow further, farther, better than where I am now at Brown Harris Stevens if I come to your firm with those things that you believe are so valuable? How is that going to change my career?
And that would require me knowing exactly what relationships you have to things like training, support tools, how important they are to you. Do they play a pain point in your business right now? Understanding you before I start rattling off, here's all the cool stuff we have, is really to find out, what do you need? What's going well? What isn't going well? Which I imagine you do with your clients, just like I might do with a recruit.
Yep, exactly. And that idea that I may or may not put a lot of value in the training that you offer. Okay. I happen to be a lifetime learner. You tell me that you're going to teach me something and I'm like, oh my gosh, please sign me up. I want to hear what you have to say. That not everybody is that way. And they may believe that they know more than what you're able to teach them. Okay. Well, that may not be true. They may be making an assumption, and we come back to logic and reasoning. They may be assuming that the knowledge that they have is already more than what you can provide them in the training that you offer. And what they need to then see through that value proposition is that you are going to offer them either it's tangential training that's going to take them in a whole different ball game to where they may not have even thought about that branch of training that they could add to their arsenal. Or they may think that they know it all, or they've been in the business for long enough where they just know as much training as a firm can offer them. If you can get them out of that assumption and show them some of the things that they may not see, now all of a sudden training sounds like something that actually might benefit them. So it's really about understanding what they need, what their pain points are, and then also alleviating or relieving some of those, or removing some of those assumptions that they might be making about what they do and do not know.
I'm curious, Han, when you go into a listing presentation, because you are such a student of people and wanting to understand their needs and their desires before going into your pitch. So if you don't mind sharing, how do you start a listing presentation?
Well, typically for me, I love to have at least some sort of conversation with the client before I meet with them in person. And that's actually, a lot of people think that that's difficult. I think that's become a little bit easier because inviting someone to a 10-minute Zoom where
Right.
where they actually have the opportunity, and what you want to do is make it in their interest. Right? That's the key to any meeting, whether it's the first, second, third, or fourth meeting. Why does it make sense for them? So oftentimes, you're going to do a listing presentation and you kind of think, well, I'm already going to be there. Am I just bothering them by actually speaking to them before I go in? Well, not if you can convey to them that they benefit from having that conversation. Hey, I really want you to be comfortable with me, and I want you to have the opportunity to have 10 minutes with me so that you can ask any questions that you want to get out of the way before I sit down in your living room. And now all of a sudden, I'm giving them an opportunity to do something that's going to ultimately make them more comfortable. It will also allow me to do certain things in New York. This is an important part of the process. You mentioned co-ops. It'll allow me to introduce something like a financial statement, which I believe, and I've trained hundreds of agents on this who have at the beginning of this kind of fought me a little bit on this, where they thought it's a little bit too intrusive to talk to your client about their financial statement or have them fill out a financial statement when you are just meeting them. And
Yeah.
again, if I present it as this is in your interest, because this is going to serve as our game plan, as our roadmap. And if we understand the assets and liabilities, the income and the debt to income ratio, if we get all of those on paper now we can start to create a path forward that's going to make you or help you become more successful in your search. And when I frame it like that, now it's like, of course, where do I sign, right? So it allows me to give them that blank financial statement so that when I do sit down with them face to face, or if they're a seller, if I'm going to their home to pitch them, I'll have a little bit more insight, a little bit more intel. Negotiation is an information game. Deepak Malhotra and Max Bazerman said it. I didn't make that up, but it's a simple, profound phrase. Negotiation is an information game. And the more intel I have, the stronger I'm going to be as a negotiator. So if I can walk into the room with more information than my competition has, now all of a sudden I've already got a leg up. But what I do when I'm there is then I want to make them, they're the boss. They're in control. I'll ask them what they would like to do first. I like to take a tour around the house if I can. And what I'm looking for when I take a tour around the house is kind of like where you look at an image for 30 seconds and you cover it up and you say, okay, tell me where you saw that. That's what I'm doing in a house when I go through, because I'm looking at how do I believe that they're going to communicate? What are going to be some metaphors, analogies that are going to land with them? Do they like to travel? Do they like to cook? Do they like sports? So I'm looking for ways that I can connect with them once we sit down. So that's initially what I do is take a walk through if they want, and if they want to sit down right away and start talking numbers, if they're an assertive driver, if they've got 15 minutes, all right, great. Now I'm going to show you in very short order why I can uniquely help you solve your problem better than anybody else, because that's all they want to know.
And by the time you've gone to that listing presentation, you have probably a decent understanding of how they communicate just from that first initial, maybe it's a Zoom meeting or even a phone call. You have a better sense of what their decision-making strategies are. You know what to look for. How did you learn, by the way, how to evaluate things like this and really help categorize people?
That's a great question. I mean, this happened after I started into my deep dive into collaborative negotiation. And the decision makers was something that I had been doing for a while in my career. Probably going back 8 to 10 years when I first started in my dive into collaborative negotiation. And really, because when you're studying collaborative negotiation, you always start with the other side. You want to know what the interests and needs are of the other side first, not because you're going to give them everything they want, not because you can give them everything they want, especially if you're negotiating on behalf of someone else, right? But understanding and having a clear understanding of what they want and need is going to make you more powerful, and it's going to help you understand or identify exchanges that you can make. So that's always been a part of that dive into collaborative negotiation. But along the way, I started incorporating, if you hear the 4 categories that I have come up with, it's very similar to the DISC profile, right? There's a lot of similarities there. And so I started with that in mind and said, okay, I want to develop a category of for decision makers, so that I can start to really be better at identifying not only one decision maker, but it really started with what happens if I have a husband and wife, a husband and a husband, partners, brother and sister, clients who are different decision maker types. How do I involve both of those decision makers in a way that's going to keep them both feeling as though I'm listening to them, that I'm hearing them, and that I'm conveying information to them in a way that they want to hear it. So that's really how it started. And there's one specific instance that I remember very clearly. It's kind of outside of my core real estate life, but my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, but my brother-in-law is my wife's brother. They were selling a house near Chicago, actually, in I can't remember the exact suburb it was, but they were selling a house near Chicago, and I was having a whole lot of conversations with him, with my brother-in-law, and it was about off-market property. He was like, I'm going to put it into a Facebook group. He wanted to try to sell it off market, and thinking that it's a very tight market. They have a unique property. So we were coming up with this whole plan of how he could do this. And then his wife, who's my sister-in-law, who I love dearly, I was leaving her out of the conversation completely. He and I were having all of these conversations, and she was not a part of any of them. And then all of a sudden, he brought to the table that she's not really on board with this plan. And all this, as a negotiator, I went, what have I done? I was like, this is a blunder, like a big blunder. I didn't bring her along at all in this conversation. And that was one of the many reasons why I was like, if I can just understand decision makers better, I can make it easier on myself to identify them and communicate with them.
Yeah, that's what a great story. I'm sure we could all relate to that, is not understanding the decision maker because that question maybe just, it didn't occur to you to come up. It's your brother, right? You might just assume that he would have mentioned that,
I thought he was in charge. He was doing it, but it's on me. It's on us as negotiators to really understand who the players are, who's involved, who's got a voice, because you need their trust. You need the trust of everyone who's got a voice and interest in that deal.
I interview a lot of people from the West Coast who deal with celebrities or athletes, and they talk about this a lot because there's often a giant team around some of these people, and they have to serve all of these masters, and they're all part of the decision-making process. And it's like, well, there's the manager, and then there's the agent, and the attorney, and the accountant, and it's could be really, really challenging. But you're right, people that understand what that hierarchy is when there's multiple people involved is critical. I want to touch base about something else. I know it's really important to you, which is navigating difficult communications, conversations, conversations in particular. So because I know that we all have avoidant parts of our personality, and I know that navigating through some of these difficult conversations are not easy. But in your experience through coaching, what have you found is like some of the most avoiding kind of conversations that agents tend to shy away from?
So one that's I think an obvious one is price reductions or any sort of a price correction. And it makes sense. And I think that when agents really think about why this makes them so uncomfortable, they can do themselves a favor on how to prep for that. And I believe through the many, many, many conversations that I've had with my team, with agents that I've coached and trained, one of the hardest parts about having that kind of a conversation is the agent believes that the price reduction is a reflection on their ability or their process or what they have and have not done. And that's a very reasonable and rational thing to believe. And it's also reasonable and rational to believe that your client might be thinking the same thing, because you're about to cost them $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 by reducing price. And it's rational and reasonable for them to think, well, am I lowering my price by $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 because my house isn't worth it? or because you haven't done enough to get me the price that I want. Right. And so we run this through our heads, especially if you're somebody who's empathetic or really wants to take care of your clients. It's not an easy conversation to have. I've been doing this for 20 years. Those conversations are still not easy, but there are things you can do to help yourself. And one of those is what kind of like a version of persuasion, right? Setting the expectations for the conversations. And the more you are in touch with your client, giving them regular updates, helping them understand what's happening and what's not happening, the less likely, when you do have that price conversation, the less likely it is that they're going to turn it on and say, what have you or have you not been doing, right? Because you are keeping up to date. You are setting that roadmap or setting the breadcrumbs to where we need to go. And so that is part of it. Is really not like hitting them with this conversation, like, hey, we need to talk, right? And you haven't had any conversation with them, or the only thing you've done is check in with them for 5 minutes after an open house each week. Really bringing them along and involving them in the process of what is happening, what you are doing, things that you've been doing that are kind of above and beyond the normal scope of what your duties would be. What are you doing to try every angle to get them the price that they want, right? And then that conversation happens and it becomes less about what you're doing, and you can speak from a place of a little bit more confidence and guide them to what now is the second piece of that. And that is, we're not lowering price so that we're not lowering price in an effort to sell quickly or lose you money. The lowering of price or the adjustment of price is actually a way for us to make sure or ensure that you get the best possible deal, because we know what happens if we don't lower our price. We know what happens if we stay where we are, and we become more and more stale. We have that data to show that there are additional discounts that happen the longer that we're on the market. So if I can reframe that conversation as, in order to ensure that you get the most possible money at closing, the best decision that we can make right now, I believe, is to course correct or price correct. And here are the reasons why. Now you bring the data. You have data based on things that are sold, things that are still on the market. You can use analogies like a horse race. I like to do analogies if they are a sports person, a car race or a horse race or a human person race, right? We're coming off the Olympics where we've seen people in competition in races. One of the ways that I do this is I'll bring an analogy and I'll say, look, right now we are in third place. If we look at the competition, there's this house, there's this apartment, whatever the comps are. We are right now in third place. In order to finish this race in first place, we have to wait, or in order to be in first place, we have to wait for the first place finisher and the second place finisher to come off the market. Whether they get sold or whether they come off the market, they decide to be temporarily or permanently off the market. We are not going to sell our apartment, our home, until first and second place sell. Are we comfortable being in third place? If not, what are we going to do to elevate our position and become the first place horse, the first place runner? And then we have to think about, during the race, unlike every other race, other horses, other cars, other people might join the race mid-race. And now all of a sudden we could go from second place to fourth place based on what's coming on market. So once I start to put that into context of where we are, especially if you've got an assertive driver who wants to win, now the question is, they start to think about, how do we get to a place where we are first place, where we win? And is lowering price the best thing I can do for myself right now? And it starts to give them a little bit more context there.
I love that. And such great advice, really, for anyone who is, I think what I'm hearing the most is this sort of intentionality about understanding when these difficult conversations, is that you want to keep the client aware of exactly what's going on as often as possible, so that when you do have to maybe have a suggestion, or that is maybe something they don't necessarily want at face value, you have prepped along the way, and then you can also support with additional data. But I think you're right. This idea of only communicating after an open house or once every few weeks, here's what's going on, and not having much news, then it does make those conversations tougher when they have to have the price drop. It's you've prepped them along the way and really given them a understanding of what the price drop actually means for them and how it could possibly benefit them. And it's not necessarily well, we just didn't get the price right necessarily. We here's what the market's telling us, here's how we need to adjust, and here's what this will do for you. So I think that's incredibly wise. I wanted to also talk about a designation that you teach, which I'm not familiar with, but it sounds amazing. So I suspect our audience does not know. A lot of them are not going to have heard of this, which is Certified Multiple Offer Expert. And I think this sounds amazing, really. And what is it? And what does an agent who earns it actually learns how to do?
Well, I'll tell you, unfortunately, right now, the actual designation of CMOE is not something that someone can get. And it's actually really unfortunate, unfortunate part of our industry. The company that I used to teach for, the Real Estate Negotiation Institute, offered the CNE designation, the MCNE designation, and the CMOE designation. The CMOE designation was an award-winning designation, and it was such the Tom Heyman, who created the Real Estate Negotiation Institute. He created this course, and what it did is it really helped. I can explain some of this that'll help a lot of agents, just in the framework of what the course taught.
Sure.
And it really allowed agents to take this, to take multiple offers with the idea that it's our job to put these offers in front of our client and help our client understand how they can look at these offers, against each other, or, how they can compare these offers when so many of the prices and terms shift, right? So what makes one offer better than the other? And we know, or I hope we all should know, that it's not always about price. Price is not always the most important factor. So the same way that we develop a value proposition in a pitch, or in a buyer representation call, or a buyer consultation, or a listing presentation, the same way that we do that in a certified or in a multiple offer scenario, where we sit down with our seller and we say, all right, given what's important to you. So that's first part of it, is what is important to the seller. So, like, reminding them how they rank their value elements, because you had that conversation with them, you understand what they value, you've ranked their value elements, because that's part of what we do in either a buyer consultation or a listing presentation, is help our client understand what is valuable to them, ranking them. So we remind them of the ranking, and then we look at these offers and we point out the value elements that are important to them. So we try to create more of an apples to apples comparison of these multiple offers, so that they're seeing them in a more clear way based on what they value and what they want out of the offers, as opposed to just saying, all right, here's price, here's down payment, here's closing timeline, and here are contingencies, right? Now here's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and without understanding how those align with what they value, it's very confusing to a seller. When you highlight what they value, now all of a sudden it becomes a lot more clear. That's what that course did. Unfortunately, the Real Estate Negotiation Institute went under just not a little less than 2 years ago. So I no longer teach for them. And I hope that in some iteration, the multiple offer course or designation comes back, because that framework, or that idea of how to create a landscape of offers that actually guides your client to make the best possible decision for them, is so important. And I'll point out one other thing in our value proposition. We talked about benefits over cost, right? One of the things that we miss sometimes in the cost, in the denominator of that cost benefit analysis, are the hidden costs, the little c costs, like the risk, the frustration, the timing, the anxiety, all of those things that may be a part of, or maybe an additional cost in that cost benefit analysis. When you are evaluating offers, when it comes to who's going to be on the other side of the table. That includes who the agent is. That includes what who the buyers are. When you can evaluate those little C costs for your client, now you're adding all kinds of value to them, because that seller can exchange $2,000 or $3,000 of sales price for what might be an equivalent of $50,000 of certainty or risk reduction. And that's our job, is to really help our clients navigate the entire picture so that they can see, is it worthwhile taking the offer that's a little bit lower than the highest offer in a multiple bidding scenario to get the certainty I want, to get the timing I want, to get a lease back, to get, all of those other elements that might be a part of the deal that might be very valuable to your client.
I thank you. That's really great advice. You've been teaching negotiation for almost 10 years now, and you've trained agents all over the country. And I'm curious, because I talk to top producers all the time, and I never think to ask them this, but what is one thing that a top producing realtor, what is one thing that they do in negotiation that the average agents simply don't? Maybe even something that looks invisible from the outside, but makes all the difference.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think that a great agent does, and they may be doing it subconsciously, they may not even know it, but I believe, and I didn't really realize this about myself or about my process until I had one of my guests on my podcast, is actually a friend of mine named Jake Feldman, and he teaches logic and reasoning for the LSAT prep tests, which is fascinating, because he's got a whole podcast where they just go through 5 questions at a time. And you wouldn't think that would be a fascinating podcast. It is. Yeah. And so he teaches this logic and reasoning as a part of the LSAT. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but the idea that we walk down a path, we as an individual think that we're thinking logically, we believe that we're going from A to B in our decision-making. We draw conclusions, we make claims, and then we draw conclusions, right? So if we think about it in its most broad sense, our clients, whether they're a buyer who needs to live in a specific neighborhood, or they have to be under a specific price point, or we have a seller that has to sell over a certain price point, right? All of those are claims, and then they draw conclusions based on that claim. And what's in between all of that are assumptions. And it's all of the things that we assume into our argument that get us to the conclusion that we draw. And oftentimes we as real estate agents are fighting so hard to disrupt the client's conclusion. We're saying, you don't have to sell over that price, or your budget can be higher, or you don't have to live in that neighborhood, right? We are going straight to their conclusion, and we're trying to hammer at that, chisel away at their conclusion in an effort to change their mind. But the reality is that they have a claim, they have a conclusion. They believe that everything on that path leads them to that conclusion. If we just move up the line a little bit more, and we can really start to understand what the assumptions are that the client has made. Why do they believe that they have to live in this neighborhood? Why do they believe that they have to sell over that price or buy under a certain price? Now, they may end up at the same conclusion. We may look at everything along that path and go, oh, now I understand the client better, and now I get what they're trying to do. And that may lead us to different options for them that will help solve their problem. But it also may be that along the way, if we can see or show that the assumption that they're making is actually not true, or that there's a different way to think about that thing, that assumption they brought into it, that might veer them off of that path completely, or a couple of different paths. And now all of a sudden, I'll tell you, this is how you get a client who is stuck, a buyer. And this is really relevant in our market, in our world right now as real estate professionals. You have a lack of inventory. You have a buyer that's been out there for 6 months, and they are continuing to just hit that wall over and over and over again. And you can see that they're becoming, more frustrated, more anxious. And sometimes they just quit altogether. if you could move up the line with them, address some of their assumptions, move them off of that path, and create a new pathway or multiple pathways for them to solve their problem, or create multiple conclusions to solve that problem. Now, all of a sudden, they're looking in different neighborhoods. They're figuring out different price points. Maybe there's a different mortgage product that'll get them to the carrying costs that they need. You're opening them up to different possibilities. And that is the magic of getting buyers to buy and sellers to sell. And I don't mean getting, because I'm not convincing or manipulating or trying to get anybody to do anything they don't want to do. My job is to help them see possibilities, to put options in front of them, and then allow them to make the decision. But if I can help them see multiple paths, now they have multiple options, and they have they're empowered to make a different decision than the conclusion that they've already drawn. That's, I think, is probably one of the greatest things that separates a good agent from an average agent. A great agent.
The ability to show them different alternatives and why it makes sense to explore those paths, get them unstuck, and then figure out which of those paths makes the most sense for them and for the business, or just for the market, I guess, at that moment. I'm curious about one more question on negotiation, because you're so obviously well researched and you've been teaching it, and it is so important to you. If you could go back to your first year in real estate, what's one thing you would tell yourself about negotiation that you just didn't know back then?
Yeah. One is I would say, understand that this is for me specifically, but I think that this will resonate with a lot of people who might be new in the industry. Understand that best case scenario rarely plays out, and worst case scenario rarely plays out. But most importantly, worst case scenario rarely plays out. Those both are true. The tail end of the distribution, you're very rarely on this end of the distribution or this end of the distribution. You're mostly it's going to happen somewhere in the meat of that distribution, right? In the middle of it. But the most important thing for your own sanity, your own burnout, your own drive, courage, self-efficacy, self-confidence, that is where, with Archway Partners, with my coaching company, that is a lot of what I develop and speak to and hone in on. Whether you've been in the business for 30 years or 3 months, is understanding your level of confidence, level of self-efficacy. And when you can understand that worst case scenario rarely ever plays out, you now see things through a different lens. You allow your prefrontal cortex to get back into the conversation, think rationally, and make decisions based on things that are likely to happen, as opposed to running around thinking my career is going to end. And that's the way we are in our first year.
That's true. Boy, it's funny. You're mentioning basically the fight or flight response, which is known as the sympathetic nervous system response, versus the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. And using that prefrontal cortex isn't really available when we're in fight or flight. So you said something very wise, which is that best and worst case scenarios often don't play out and very rarely play out. So the idea of going into fight or flight isn't necessary most of the time. Right. And it's going to prohibit us from accessing that sort of deeper ability to have complex thoughts, better decision-making, which is in that parasympathetic, nervous system response, which is the calmer, let's figure this out, there's a solution here, so that is incredibly wise. I want to sort of end with Archway Partners. You just talked about it. This is your coaching company, and you founded it. Yep. Who is it for?
Oh, it's for every agent in every stage, in every facet of every level of their business. I believe very strongly that coaching is not just for experienced agents looking for a breakthrough or new agents looking to get started. Coaching and the way I coach, I'm an ACC accredited coach through the ICF. So I have gone through coaching training so that I can be the type of coach that bring that coach approach and really ride alongside and support all of the people that I coach. So Archway Partners is that support to help you, whatever level you are in your business, to help you get to the next and the next and the next level. And we do that through not only negotiation training, which is going to help you become a more confident, more competent agent, and I believe competency is equally as important as self-confidence. But what we bring to the table is idea of creating agents or helping agents become awesome at what they do. Our coaching company is not about, and I believe that there's a place for brand, marketing, I'm not a social media coach. It's not where I land. It's not my forte. It's not my expertise. My expertise is in helping agents become better practitioners, better at what they do. So if I were to hone in on the client avatar, the agent avatar for my company, doesn't have to do with what level they are in their business. It's for people that believe that there's a place for agents that are integrous, that are driven, that are honest, that have a high moral compass, that can achieve at the highest level in our business. And that is how I've built my career. And 20 years later, it's what I have to share with people of all experience levels in this industry is, how do I sleep well at night, do right by my clients, negotiate like a master, negotiate fiercely and ferociously for my clients, and also create relationships along the way that are going to be lasting, have that reputation that you want, but achieve in a way that there's no level, there is no ceiling. That's what I do at Archway Partners.
Where do you find that the agents who are Archway Partner coaching clients, what is their big sticking point? Why do they come to you? You know, you talked about all of the wonderful things you'll do for them. Where are they typically stuck?
Yeah. I think a lot of agents that come to me are typically stuck because they don't know what success means for them. Like they've been told what it means to achieve. They've been told, hey, do this, do that. They've been told by their broker owner, by their sales director, by their team leader. And they're just kind of like, I've tried these things and I'm just not sure how they fit into what I believe my measure of or level of success is for me. And then I can help them understand or more clearly identify what it is that they want. And then depending on what they want, how do they see themselves getting there? What does it look like when they do get there? And now we're creating a path that is their path to get where they want to go. And it doesn't mean that will still fit into where their sales director, their team leader, their broker owner want them to go. They want them to be successful. But we can't just say that making more phone calls or knocking on more doors or creating more videos is the pathway for your success. It may be, but it may be different for you. It may be a different path. It may be a different way to get there. And we all want to feel confident along that journey. And that's the other thing I see when people come to me is they could be in the business for 20 years and they get done with every deal and they are like, I think that might be the last deal I ever do. And we have agents that are like that have been successful making 7-figure incomes. And they turn around every time a deal closes and they're like, oh my God, that was the worst experience I've ever had. And I don't want to do another deal in my life. And a lot of that is because they're not operating from a place of personal power and self-confidence. So I want people to understand where it is that they can go in their career, but then to go through that journey with a level of confidence where they can lift their shoulders, they can put their shoulders back, where they feel powerful in what they do. And they're ready to actually go after that goal, as opposed to just feel like a pinball, getting bounced around all over the place.
Well, if anyone in our audience, and you really, I think, have made a strong case that obviously what you're doing, but I love what you just said about really customizing their business to the things they enjoy and what they want to learn. And not, most coaching programs truthfully are sort of a one size fits all in a sense, where there's going to be certain parts of everyone's business that are be focused on, and you should do it this way. And I can't tell you how well you would know this. Of course, you would know this. How many agents I talk to who say, I don't ever want to make cold calls. It's like, okay, well, there are other paths. But my managing broker said that's what I need to do. It's like, well, if it doesn't make you comfortable, you have two choices. You could learn to get comfortable, or we could figure out something else that doesn't make you miserable. And that's what I love about what Archway Partners does. It really sort of customizes it to the individual at the same time with all of those ethics that you mentioned. It's how do I build a successful practice where I'm happy and I'm feeling good about what I do? And archwaypartnersinc.com is where you go to learn more about what Eirik and his team offers. And I hope a lot of our agents reach out, because I think this is a very unique value proposition that I don't hear much in the coaching world. I don't hear it at all, actually. I hear a lot about technique. And you teach that, of course, as well, specifically around negotiation. But a lot about designing a life is really what I'm hearing, or a business life that is something that you won't want to leave just because you have a difficult deal. So archwaypartnersinc.com is where you go. Also, want to follow Eirik on social, go to his Instagram, which is Eirik the Expert. I'm going to spell Eirik. It's EIRIK. We will have a link to that in the show notes. Eirik the Expert. And Eirik Gislason, Davey Gislason, sorry. We are so thrilled that you came back, and boy, so much value was given to our audience in this short hour that we spent. And I am so grateful that you were willing to come back here. I can't wait to check out your podcast, Sheer Line Negotiation Mastery, which you can find anywhere podcasts are served. And I'm excited because I need to learn more about these skills as well. And so thank you on behalf of our audience for your time. On behalf of Eirik and myself, we want to thank the audience for making it all the way to the end of the episode. We're grateful to you. Please check out our sponsors. Also, the best way that you can help us with our show is by telling a friend. Think of another realtor, a real estate professional that could benefit from hearing this conversation, and shoot them a link or just let them know about the show. We would appreciate it. And we will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Eirik.
Thank you so much, DJ. I appreciate it.